Psalm 118. I thank you, Yahweh, for your goodness. Your love is everlasting. Let Israel say it. Your love is everlasting. Open the gates of justice for me. Let me come in and thank you, Yahweh. This is the gate of Yahweh, and only the upright can enter. Thank you for hearing me, for saving me. It was the stone which the builders rejected that became the keystone, and this is Yahweh's doing, and it is wonderful to see. This is the day Yahweh has made. Let us celebrate with joy. Please, Yahweh, please save us. Please, Yahweh, give us prosperity now. Blessings on the one who comes in the name of Yahweh. We bless you from Yahweh's temple. Yahweh is God, and God has enlightened us. Join the festal procession with palm fronds in hand. Go up to the horns of the altar. You are my God, and I thank you. You are my God, and I exalt you. Thank you for hearing me, for saving me. Thank you, Yahweh, for your goodness. Your love is everlasting.
More voices. It's number 8. We're going to sing it through a total of twice. It's called And on This Path. And in body or in spirit, as you're comfortable and able.
Our focus reading this morning is from Luke 19, 28 to 40. Jesus has recently enjoyed the hospitality of Zacchaeus and further confounded those who found his ministry a threat. While Zacchaeus was discovering how liberating discipleship could be, Jesus tells those who were listening a parable about investing and what is expected of those who follow him. We pick up the story as Jesus nears Jerusalem. After he told this story, Creator sets free, Jesus, walked on ahead of his followers to the village of Peace, Jerusalem. When he came to the house of figs, Bethany, at the foot of Olive Mountain, he said to 2 of his followers, "Go to the house of unripe figs, Bethphage, on the other side of the mountain. When you come into the village, you will see a young donkey colt tied there that no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it to me. If anyone asks what you are doing, say this to them: our wisdom keeper is in need of it." His followers did as they were told. When they arrived at the village, they found everything just as he had said. When they started untying the colt, the owners asked him, "What are you doing?" They answered the owners just as they had been instructed, so they were permitted to go. They brought the young donkey colt to Creator Sets Free and laid their deer skins and tribal blankets on the donkey colt. He then mounted the colt and began his ride. Creator Sets Free came riding into the sacred village of Peace, down Olive Mountain toward the eastern entry into the village of Peace. That is called Beautiful Gate. His 12 followers encircled him and led the colt forward. He did not fit the powerful image of a conquering ruler, for he was not riding a war horse. Instead, he rode a small, humble donkey colt. No mighty warriors rode next to him. No dignitaries came out to meet him. It was mostly the common people who welcomed him that day. As he rode forward, some of the people began to spread their buffalo robes on the road in front of Creator Sets Free. When he reached the foot of Olive Mountain, the whole village was in an uproar. His followers began to sing to Creator and shout out loud, praising him for the powerful signs they had seen. Blessed is the grand chief who comes representing the Great Spirit. Peace to the spirit world above, and honor and shining greatness to the one above us all. Some of the separated ones, the Pharisees, who were in the crowd, spoke up. Wisdom keeper, they cried out, warn your followers to watch what they are saying. It was a dangerous thing to call upon a chief or ruler in front of the soldiers of the people of iron, the Romans, who were guarding this area. I will tell you this, he said to them. If they were silenced, their very stones and rocks we are walking on would lift their voices and cry out. In these pieces of Christian witness, we see Christ. Thanks be to God.
I'm going to invite you to join with me in watching this short video as a way of reflecting on the readings we've heard and entering into our time of reflection.
One need not look very hard or very long to find reason for despair if one feels so inclined. I take something like food security and wonder, can I really do much about that challenge? I compare the scale of the challenge to my skills and think, yeah, there's not that much that I can do. So it's easy to despair. But I think about Jesus entering Jerusalem in parade-like fashion, knowing that it's going to cause upset and anger, knowing that he has little reason for hope for his own life. And same with all those around him. What hope did they have? Except they come out and they gather around and they lay down the palm branches. They're pushing back the despair. They're creating space for hope. That's what God does. God disrupts our tendencies toward despair. God delivers us, indeed, from despair and creates hope, gives us stories of impossible hope. And so when we do the things that we do in our lives, we do them often for the sake of hope. We don't know for sure that the seeds will sprout, that they'll grow food, but we sow them anyway, trusting that that in itself is an act of hope, and that in itself makes a difference in some way. May we live into that deliverance from despair.
Friends, let's pray together. Be near, O God, as we contemplate these ancient words. Help us to find within them a source that pulls us away from despair and towards hope. Help us find space within the words and around them to weave our own lives, that together we might join the very stones in crying out with hope, changing the world one gospel action at a time. Bless, O God, the words of my mouth, the hearts and minds and souls of those that hear them, and will help turn them into action. Amen. It's a pretty familiar story for those who are part of the Christian tradition. Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. His arrival in one gate. Some would say, as others are coming in, the official kind of foreign dignitary gate. Because things were getting closer and closer to the Passover celebration. And so folks were showing up in droves, and the population of Jerusalem was expanding greatly as all of these other folks came to celebrate Passover. And here comes Jesus, riding on the colt of a donkey. A very different kind of entry. Yes, surrounded by his 12 disciples, if you want to think of them as like, the RCMP around Jesus, making sure nothing too bad happened. And that wouldn't be an unrealistic understanding. And as he comes in, the crowd, of course, we're told, gets more and more excited. More and more people show up, and they tear down palm branches like the ones that you have, and they place them on the ground, and they take off their cloaks, and they put them on the ground, creating their own peasant version of a red carpet. And Jesus gets challenged because that kind of unrest, that kind of power, that kind of physical presence, well, that disrupted the apple cart. That rocked the boat. And we all know what tends to happen to people who rock the boat. And so the Pharisees tell him to be quiet, to tell his followers to be quiet. And Jesus responds with that very popular phrase, "Even if I did, the stones would cry out." There's something about this quest for justice, this quest for compassion and understanding, and creating communities where no one is left behind, where no one is forgotten. Doesn't matter what their history has been, or what they've said, or done, or not said for that matter, or not done, where everyone is welcomed, included, valued, wanted, and affirmed. There's something about that kind of energy and that kind of movement that even if people were silenced, the very stones would cry out. I think as we begin our Lenten journey, and I say begin because we won't end worship today with a benediction, but just with a commissioning as we move through Holy Week and towards Good Friday and then on towards Easter before our service ends. That as we begin Holy Week, the question is, if you were one of those stones, for what would you cry out this Lenten season? What is it in your own life or in our community that you would cry out on behalf of? What have you witnessed enough of that you're prepared to say no more? Enough is enough. What is it that burns within your heart where that you're prepared to say, I'm going to do something different today? Well, you might say, well, I'll do something different tomorrow, but no later than tomorrow. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. It's not like, I'm going to sell everything off, but I'm going to make some small change. The stones weren't big. They were paving stones, right? They're small stones. They're irregular in shape in the ancient world. They're rounded, smooth because of all the feet and hooves and sandals and wagon wheels that have gone over them over tens of hundreds of years. But each one would have cried out. Each one would have offered its voice to change the world. And I think in this moment in human history, that's a question for us this Lenten season, this beginning of Holy Week. What would we cry out, even when the world tells us to be quiet and go away and be silent? After the development of nuclear weapons and when they were tested in the Pacific on certain islands, about 15 to 20 years later, they started to show some signs of life and recovery once again. And there was an intentional effort to try and repopulate these islands with animals and different kinds of trees and shrubs and insects and all that you need to have a viable ecosystem. And through the 50s and 60s, scientists realized that lots of things were happening, but they wanted to reintroduce chimpanzees to the islands. One of the challenges was that the husks on the bananas were still radioactive. But if you washed the husk, you could clean the banana. And so they undertook this teaching exercise where they taught 10 chimpanzees how to wash their bananas before they ate them. To go to a stream, wash the banana, and then eat it and throw away the husk. It's a story called The 100th Chimpanzee. And so they had these 10 chimps trained, and they released them into the wild, and they kept an eye on things, as you would. And eventually, what they realized is that the 10 chimpanzees taught other chimpanzees, right? As learning species, they taught and learned from one another. And eventually there was 20 chimps that were all washing their bananas in the stream. And then there was 30, and then 50, and then 90. But the problem was there was thousands of chimpanzees. And this was taking a long, long time. And the scientists noticed that something miraculous happened at about the 100th chimpanzee. All of a sudden, there was an explosion of learning in the community. And they went from 100 to thousands. And all of a sudden, it was the odd one out that wasn't washing their banana. Everybody else was picking them and going off to the stream to wash the banana before they ate it, like you would, right? But there's something about that reaching that critical mass that then kind of tips the scale and it becomes a communal movement. I think in some ways that's what Jesus is talking about, in that the stones would cry out. It starts with a small group of people. It starts with you and me. And eventually we show others what's possible by the way we live our lives. And eventually they go, well, that's actually not a bad idea. And they start to live their lives like that too. And eventually something like homelessness or poverty or the opioid crisis can be overcome. Not because some politician somewhere writes a really great speech with really great words, and not because something becomes law, but because people like you and I refuse to be silent and instead cry out like the stones in the story would have. So that we model a different way of being like the 100 chimpanzees. And in so doing, we don't just change our lives, we change the lives of others and create a community for everyone. Thanks be to God. Amen.